Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am the host of the show, Courtney Anderson. Thank you so much for being here today. This is our 159th episode of the show. I'm so excited. 159 episodes. I honestly never thought when I started to see if with episode 1 and 2 and 3 to see if this was a potential vehicle for having fun, actually, and then also adding to the modalities for my different business ventures, that this would grow as quickly as it has and be so well received. So thank you. I always encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com. On our website, we have our blog where we have everything that we put out, this show, our video programs, articles. Everything is in our blog, and then we have individual show pages. So please come to the individual show page. That will be episode 159, and see the full notes and links and everything, show sponsor showcase for this show, and that's all there on that individual page, which of course is linked to via the blog entry, or you can just come to the website and go right to the episode 159 page. What are we talking about today? What? Well, for one, we're doing a show that is part of the Joyful Art of Business series. And the Joyful Art of Business series, of course, is one of our fundamental principles. And it's the idea that when we're looking at our endeavors, we're just calling that business generically, whether it's paid or volunteer, we want to remember that we do bring something individual, uniquely us, to what we do. We're calling that art. And we want to emphasize that when we're looking at our assessment of how we've spent our time, talent, and toil, we want to look beyond just sort of thinking of the economic or financial metrics. We want to think about how we feel. More often than not, do we feel good or bad? Ideally, more often than not, we want to feel good. I'm just labeling that joyful. Again, not that every single second of our professional endeavors is just moments of ecstasy filled with moments of bliss. But the idea is that we're trying to avoid this sort of stereotype and real life outcome where people seem like outwardly they should be happy. They have, quote, a good job, quote, prestigious job, and yet they are miserable. And then that puts somebody in a situation where they feel guilty, right? Well, how can I complain? Look at my great opportunities, wonderful income, and potentially lifestyle, and yet I feel awful. I'm unhappy. Maybe I'm in serious distress. We don't want that to happen. So to prevent people getting in that position and thinking they've achieved everything that they thought they, quote, wanted, and then they realize they're miserable, we want to make sure that along the way, every step of our path, we're asking ourselves, is this helping me practice my joyful art of business? Because if it isn't, I don't need to keep doing it. I don't care what other people say. I don't care how well it's received. I don't even care how, quote, good I am at something. If I don't feel good, more often than not, this is not the right path for me to continue long term. And so that's what we're doing. Because you matter. And that's the whole purpose of the show. So Joyful Art of Business series, this is episode 159 specifically. What's our episode today talking about when we're trying to remember to be focused holistically on how we feel, in addition to all these other aspects of our professional life? This specific show is entitled, Is the Size of Your Vocabulary Limiting the Size of Your Paycheck? Is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? So that's our show topic. And this is one of the shows that when I'm working through the show list and I'm working through potential episode selections, I can get really caught up in research and thinking through potentially is something going to be a show that I'd want to do, or a show I want to do now, or a show maybe to table, maybe potentially for later. This is one of the shows I just got lost in research. Happily lost. Gleefully going around to see what data was readily available. I obviously, like all of us, you, myself, and all the rest of us, we wish we just had more time, right? The more I read, the more I want to read about this question. Is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? Now, disclaimers and stipulations. I love reading. Beyond loving reading, I love words. I really do. So for me, I love the rush of I'm reading something, let's say, and I see a word and I think, oh, let me double check because I'm pretty sure I'm correct on my definition, but let me just double check. And I get excited when I look and I realize, oh my goodness, I was accurate. That's exactly what that word means. I get even more excited when I realize, oh goodness, the dictionary shows that I was a little bit inaccurate or maybe wildly inaccurate. I get super psyched when I'm reading something and I see a word I've never seen. Never seen. I'm looking at the word and I'm thinking, what is this word? I do not know. I've never seen. But I've never seen this word before in my life. Or if I do, I don't recall. And then I'll go look it up and then I think, oh, interesting word. And now I've learned a new word. And I do this just consistently all the time. Honestly, again, since we're doing disclaimers and stipulations, I do this for fun. So it's not like it's work related. It's not like, oh, I have a legal issue that I have to do some specific reading for a client, or I'm working on some research for a graduate course that I'm teaching at the university, or my consulting client has asked me to look into this issue for them. It's not even that, where someone else has directed me to do this. I do this for fun. I relax. One of my favorite ways to relax is reading. I look forward to flying for many reasons because I get to go places and experience the world, and it's exciting and wonderful. And I also just love the science and the art of flight. I think I've mentioned in other programs that I've not completed. I dropped out of my pilot license classes, but I am getting ready to restart those so that I can go ahead and finish that up. I love flying so much. I want to not just ride on an airplane. I want to move forward as a private pilot. So I have many interests, but one of the most exciting things I love about being on a plane is because I know that I'll have, at least as of the time of recording this program, a quiet space to read. I look forward to the reading because the reading is fun. I will sit in my hot tub or jacuzzi and read and think I'm having just a ball. Think I'm having the best time you could ever possibly imagine. And that's because I love reading. I really love it. And so when we're talking about this question of, is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? I'm biased. I love reading. I love words themselves. I love vocabulary. So, of course, I'm going to initially want to put forward the potential conclusion that, well, of course it is. Of course it is. Well, I love vocabulary, so then I'm going to want to believe that the more we work to enhance, increase, supplement our vocabulary, that it's going to benefit us. I believe those things. But that's my own bias. So as I said, I got lost in the research. Part of it is because I was fully aware that I went into this with this preference ahead of time for the outcome that I would prefer. And so I was trying as much as time will permit, which as always, I wish I had more time, to make sure that I wasn't just completely finding other resources that are based on a love like I have for just words. So again, when we talk about in all of our different programs reaching, and more importantly than that, what we really talk about is surpassing our goals. Vocabulary, of course, are the words we use that we're using correctly. That the word we're using means the same thing that other people that use it to mean. And when we talk about in so many different programs, our management program, Management Magician series, our HR Heroes series, our Financial Fierceness series, even our Myth Warrior series, we talk about these issues with work and these opportunities we desire. You and I, we desire the opportunity to do different things. Maybe, not have the same old sort of boring routine that we're not really excited about, but we want opportunity. And so the idea of providing ourselves the ability to do different things when we want to is it's a very privileged focus. But for many of our programs, that's what we're talking about. By the time we're talking to managers, so many of the sort of basic needs of what we have to have as humans have already been met. I mean, we're really just talking about how you can achieve sort of a greater quality of life, how you can achieve more and surpass more of the goals that you have. This is a very sort of, again, privileged perspective. So let's look and see. When you look in the show notes, you'll see a couple of questions that I'm endeavoring to at least address if we don't have the ability to answer them in one show. The first part of the question is what I was just referring to, vocabulary, right? Why is it important? And in a more, I think, blunt way of saying it is, who cares? Now, I again said, I'm already in love. I'm in love with words. I really do. I think it's fun. I love learning new words. Daily I learn new words, or I'll refresh something that I wasn't totally confident on in terms of meaning. I love it. And I don't even just love it in English. That's my native language that I learned first. I love it in other languages that I study. So I love it in Spanish or Italian or French. I just love the whole idea of how we create and utilize language and all the different things that are fascinating and wonderful about that and beautiful. But for some people, and I know that they exist, it may not be any of us on the program here, because we may have sort of self-selected just by the topic and then be willing to invest time in this. We may already all be fans of vocabulary and enhancing our vocabulary and already enjoy it, be predisposed to that. But we must be honest. There are many, many, many people who are not like myself, certainly, and many of us. They don't love vocabulary. There are people who, in fact, don't even enjoy reading, whether it's a word, right, an individual word, or even a longer phrase, or a sentence, or a paragraph, or an article, or a book. There are people who I don't hear it so much in my life today, because a lot of my work, I'm around other people who love reading, which makes sense because they went into jobs that require a lot of reading. And I'm around a lot of students and people that I work with through this. Community members, people that I am doing everything I can formally and informally to try to help people surpass their goals, right? So how can we work on someone's resume? What type of career aspirations does someone have? So I'm already talking to this really, again, group that's selected largely by these different criteria, that if they don't love reading, they are willing to spend a whole bunch of time doing it. But that's not representative of society at large. There are many people, again, that I don't talk to that much right now in my daily activities, but there are people I've talked to in the past, and it's an understanding. There are people who say that they don't like reading. There are people who say that they hate it. I've visited people at where they live. Now, where I live, not a surprise, because I enjoy reading. There are many reading materials. Many of them are books, physical books, partially because I began reading really many, many, many years ago when I was a little child, and they didn't have internet ebooks or any kind of technology like that, so it was a physical book. And I have so many of books that and I love it so much that I'll just walk by my bookshelf and see a certain title, and I'll look at it, and I'll remember the joy or the interest or the anger or the awakening that book brought to me. It elicits literally like an emotional and sometimes physical response when I just think about remembering the reading of it. That's how much I love this. I love ideas. And so for me, of course, one of the easy ways to continue to expose myself to all these ideas is to read. And of course, I read words. So the more I expand my vocabulary, then the more different types of things I read. And one of the ways that we have to be really fair and honest with ourselves when we look at this question of who cares about vocabulary is we can't just think about ourselves. We obviously care because we're spending time on a program, on the show today, talking about the size of our vocabulary. Obviously, it's interesting to us. The issue, though, is beyond our own preferences and predilections, what is a more accurate and reflective analysis of this in the larger society globally? So again, I got caught up in the research for this, but there are a couple of resources when you come to the show page. Again, it's CourtneyAnderson.com. This is episode 159. You'll see, and of course, it's part of our Joyful Art of Business. So when you come to the show page, you'll see some notes. One of the things that I link to in the show page is an article from a professor emeritus of education and humanities at the University of Virginia, E.D. Hirsch Jr., who there's an article I've linked to, and puts forward this information. Professor Hirsch Jr. says, there is a positive correlation between a student's vocabulary size in grade 12, the likelihood that she will graduate from college, and her future level of income. Now let's one more time, because the show's title is what? Is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? Now I already admitted up front that my personal guess is yes. Partially though, that's because I just love vocabulary itself. So just imagine, if you love cinnamon, and the question is will more cinnamon, improve your career? You probably want to say yes, because you already love cinnamon. So I'm biased. I own it. But again, I found some data, which the links are on the show page, and the reason is so you can go read it yourself and then go see what data and research you can locate and see what your conclusion is. I'm just sharing with you what I was able to do under my parameters of time and the ability for the program today. So again, that sentence, there's a positive correlation between a student's vocabulary size in grade 12, the likelihood that she will graduate from college, and her future level of income. So we can interpret that. We can interpret that. Doesn't mean it's conclusive, but we can interpret that to mean the answer to the question of the episode title, is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? The answer is yes. Continuing on from the quotes in the show page, it says, the reason is clear. Vocabulary size is a convenient proxy for a whole range of educational attainments and abilities, not just skill in reading, writing, listening, and speaking, but also general knowledge of science, history, and the arts. Another quote from the same article from the same author says, simply put, knowing more words makes you smarter. Knowing more words makes you smarter. And between 1962 and the present, a big segment of the American population began knowing fewer words, getting less smart, and becoming demonstrably less able to earn a high income. So our question was, income and vocabulary, they anything to do with each other? Totally unrelated? What's going on? I have some source that I've put forward in the show notes, and I've linked to the longer resource for you to digest and investigate. And here's at least someone unrelated to my personal preferences. I mean, I don't know the person personally, who's put forward with some level of certainly expertise and accomplishment in the area of education, the argument that, yes, knowing more words makes you smarter. Okay. There's a positive correlation between a student's vocabulary size in grade 12, likelihood that she will graduate from college, and her future level of income. And then the article talks about many different ramifications and has many different perspectives beyond the scope of our program today. But the quote I read, where it talks about between 1962 and the present, and this article is a 2013 article. A big segment of the American population began knowing fewer words, getting less smart, and becoming demonstrably less able to earn a high income. Again, repeating the show question we asked, which was, is there any relationship? Is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? Are they related in some way? Bigger vocabulary, bigger size check. This is saying, and yes, or my interpretation of what this is saying is at some level, yes. There's another link on the show page. It's to Discover magazine article which has a statistical analysis of different data points, and they link and show you where their data points are. And it's, again, asking the same question: higher vocabulary and higher income. Is there any relationship? Its argument is that there's a correlation. Again. So these are just a few sources to get you started. I mean, you obviously are going to go find your own resources and work through this on your own. But my argument is, yes. And this also ties into what I see, certainly what I've seen as a small business owner, as someone who has been thrilled to work with lots of different size organizations around the world. The way that we express ourselves, communication. Now, communication has a lot of aspects to it. So there's, everything from our posture to our eye contact, to our tone of voice, our pitch of voice. And of course, I've done and will continue to do, and we have different shows and articles and programs about all the different aspects of this, because I've certainly had the opportunity over the last 15 plus years to train on so much of this. But communication, part of that, of course, is the words. Like, what are you communicating? And having the ability to express yourself with more personalization and in a way that meets whatever the expectations are of the environment, of the organization, of the client, and exceeds them, is helpful. So there's another part on the show page where I actually, because once I started going down, that's the thing about, the joy we all have for information, assuming obviously you're part of our program, then you have interest in information. But what part of the challenge is, we get in that state that many reports label the state of flow, right? Where you're just so caught up in what you're doing that you lose track of time, and you're just sort of immersed and engulfed and alive in that experience. Athletes can have it in physical activity. You can have flow in any type of endeavor. You can have it while you're painting or singing or writing or reading. And so when I'm doing the research, often for really anything, I get caught up in the flow all the time, and I'll have no idea really how much time I've spent on this one article because I read something there that made me think, oh, I wonder about this. And then I went and said, I wonder what I can find out there. That's the beauty to me. The best thing of the internet is that it's, you have just the best library imaginable, and so many resources are literally right here. I just love it. And I'm somebody who spent some of my happiest memories as a young person at the library, just in the shelves, and in summer break going and spending time where they have programs where you spend all day maybe in the library doing different reading and activities. I just love it. So having this library available through the internet is, for me, exciting. But the challenge, of course, is I get caught up in flow, and then we have to work continually to maintain our our requirements for all of the different professional and personal things we need to do. But one of the things I have to mention that's in the show notes is this. So, of course, our question is the size of your vocabulary limiting the size of your paycheck? We're talking adult to adult. Of course, focusing on joyful art of business, focusing on surpassing our goals, and, of course, my perspective as the workplace relationship expert has been focusing on work. So we're talking about adults. But as I was reading through this, some of the most common and most recent university data and media coverage was about children. It was about the impact of vocabulary on children. And so, of course, I had to see reasonably just to sort of peek and see what that was talking about. And basically, my argument is this: the vocabulary issue, it's not just limiting the size of your paycheck, right? The limited vocabulary is limiting the size of your paycheck. Small vocabulary, small paycheck. It also, for those of you who are around young children or have children of your own, it's impacting those children negatively. So our show is talking about size of vocabulary, right? So if you have small vocabulary, small paycheck. Big vocabulary, big paycheck. That was the business focus, and that is the business focus that we're talking about, right? But I have to mention, and when you go to the show page for the show, which of course is episode 159, you can just put that in the CourtneyAnderson.com search box. It'll pull it right up for you. I have to mention this issue that it's way beyond your paycheck. Again, if you have children, or you're around children, you think about having children, and just in general for humanity, someone has children, and that we all certainly care about collectively. This is from Stanford University from 2013. 50 years of research has revealed, 50 years of research has revealed the sad truth that the children of lower income, less educated parents typically enter school with poorer language skills than their more privileged counterparts. By some measures, 5-year-old children of lower socioeconomic status score more than 2 years behind on standardized language development tests by the time they enter school. This is sobering. The quote says it's sad. It is, but it's sobering. A 5-year-old is already 2 years, but more than 2 years behind. They're only 5 years old. And what the argument is, when the argument I'm making is, yes, there's a direct relationship. Your vocabulary, your paycheck. Smaller vocabulary, smaller paycheck. Larger vocabulary, larger paycheck. But I'm also arguing it's bigger than just you. That you affect other people. So, and again, this is very overgeneralized, but smaller vocabulary is less, so less reading and less speaking to newborns and children between the age of birth and 5 years old. That hinders them in such a way that by the time they even start school, they're more than 2 years behind the children who were in an environment where they were read to, and where the adults, the parents and or other adults, use large, expansive vocabularies. There's another quote in the show notes that again, talking about this bigger picture aspect. So forget about just you and your check. Think about how you're impacting other people, and specifically children, with the vocabulary issue. So the other quote comes from a media article in a newspaper, which is one of our show sponsors, USA Today. And the link quote says this: previous research has shown that low-income children tend to have far smaller vocabularies than their middle-class peers, a deficit that dooms many to an inferior education before it even begins. Demographics isn't destiny, he said. It's one of the quoted sources in the article. But vocabulary might be. Demographics isn't destiny, but vocabulary might be. Wow. So the first question, of course, my size of my vocabulary, is the size of my vocabulary related to the size of my paycheck? My argument is yes. I also argue that this is bigger than just you, and it's bigger than just your paycheck. It is also going to have sort of a ripple effect to other people that you have in your family, or that you may be involved with, especially with the young children developing language. So, in fact, there's one media resource I found that was a couple of years old, so I didn't include it in the show notes, and it was written in a provocative style, but it was basically saying something along the lines of, mother's poor vocabulary, dooms child, or something of that sort of, a bit sensationalistic, but it was trying to make the same argument, right? And that it's not just you and your paycheck, but it's the next generation, who is, by the time they even start a schooling, is already behind. And they've only been alive, 5 years, or they're already more than 2 years, 2.5 years behind. Wow. And it's also got references in both of these resources from Stanford and from the USA Today articles. Basically, they're talking about how the deficit, meaning you're already behind before you even started school, right? And that deficit, it just increases. They fall more behind. So part of the reason why I said the research had just got very involved is because I started focusing on this one relatively narrow question, right? You working, your income and opportunities, and the relationship, if any, between that and your vocabulary. And then potentially my interpretation has been, see, that it wouldn't just be just you and just your job, but also it could impact your children. or children that are in your life that you're interacting with and or taking care of. So a couple of other things in the show notes. Once, of course, I started down the rabbit path, I've asked the question, well, how do we have an idea what our vocabulary currently is? Because when we talk about the size of your vocabulary, size of your paycheck, this is something in so many other programs that I keep saying it over and over again, data is your friend, data is your friend. How do you know what the size of your paycheck is relative to average or anything else? How do you know what the size of your vocabulary is at all? So when you look in the show page, and this is, I really do encourage you to do this. I found two resources that are both parts of research projects. So they're totally free, 100% free. The first one is a vocabulary. So these are two different websites you go to, and basically you're trying to find out an estimate of what your vocabulary might be. The first one is on the show notes. The link is there, but it's testyourvocab.com. And from what the notes say on the website, and I found this first source through a link in The Economist. So you'll see I've included the little link from The Economist where I found the link, so you'll be able to have that as part of your resources too. So this testyourvocab.com, you go there, it's free, and it's really short. It's just literally a few quick minutes maybe, and you just click on some words, and then it's going to, I guess, extrapolate. I don't guess, but you answer just a few issues about words you recognize or know or feel you know, and then it extrapolates that out and gives you really quick feedback over regarding what your vocabulary or vocabulary range may be. And this was the notes show that it was created by an independent American Brazilian research project. Okay, so I went and took the test. I went to testyourvocab.com, took the test. This is obviously not a sponsor or anything of our program, as it's a research free open resource, but I really do encourage you, if you're curious and you're thinking, well, how do I know what my vocabulary is? Why not look? It can't hurt. So I took the test myself, and then the second resource that I provided, same type thing, free, research based, and this is research that was put together by a course in the School of Engineering and Computer Science at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. And so the second website is my.vocabularysize.com. my.vocabularysize.com, and the link, of course, is in the show page notes. And I took this test too. Now this test is longer than the first one, so the first one is really just a few quick issues for you to look at on the screen. The second test, the my.vocabularysize.com, is, I think it was 140 different questions where they're basically giving you a word in a sentence, and then, or in a phrase, and then asking if if you recognize the definition, and they'll give you the choices to pick from, or to say, I don't know. And I took that too, which is one of the reasons why the research, right? Now you see why. Where does all her time go? Well, because I don't recommend anything or say anything, whether it's a resource, a show sponsor, a program, a product, anything, unless I use it, I know about it, or I have some advanced level of knowledge. I just don't randomly put things out that I don't look into at some level. Of course, I don't have the ability, due to time constraints and the breadth of all of the amount of material that we talk about, to have any beyond a cursory overview. But I do want you certainly to understand there's a lot of time and resources that goes into every single aspect of these programs. So again, I can't guarantee anything, and I don't have any knowledge beyond what I share with you, but I do it myself before I would recommend it or talk to somebody about it. So I did the second test, and again, that took a little bit longer. It depends on how quickly you read and click on things on the computer. It doesn't take that long. I mean, it still took, I don't know, 15 minutes maybe. But the point is, and that again depends on your own speed and your technology and everything. But the point simply is that there's free ways. And I thought it was interesting, right? That's part of the problem too. So I take the test, I look and see that's what the test said. My results were interesting. Now I want to see, how does that compare to sort of the average test taker, etc. One of the things I do want to note for the second free source, the my.vocabularysize.com, again, it was from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. Some of the words they're written, at least on my version, not in standard American English. So you understand certainly that American English has some spelling differences and also has some different words and word usage than in British English or Australian or New Zealand English or South African English or Indian English, and certainly for those of us who've been to a lot of places around the world, I'm not talking about just the accents. I'm talking about actually the in many instances spelling, in some instances actually definition or the usage, in some instances some not, they weren't tested on this, but grammar. So be aware of that. So what I'm saying is there's some words on there that I thought, what? Or I recognized what the word would be, but I saw it was spelled slightly different than American English, and so I just want you to know that, so it's not your imagination, but but I thought it was a really, really interesting test. And so when you take it, then you look at your results, and then they have pages on their website, so they'll show you sort of their data and where you sort of fall on the continuum of their analysis. And the test is, here's the thing, you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you have some sort of ability to be able to get data. So whatever your vocabulary is now, could it be increased? Yes. Now, certainly, is it possible that there's a show community member right now whose vocabulary is literally the most expansive vocabulary in the history of the universe, and is such an expert that they know and create new words, and there's nothing more they can learn? That's possible, but it's not probable. So no matter where you are in the spectrum, that's just to help you understand where you are, to give you some data. Remember, data is our friend. Data is our best friend in many instances. And then we're going to be able to make better choices. Let's talk about solutions. I talk about outcomes constantly. Why am I doing this? Because that's how we can try to figure out if we're making good decisions. The analogy I use all the time, right? Do I need to take my umbrella outside? Well, I don't know. Is it raining? How am I going to find out? I could get data from a credible source. Oh, let me look at the satellite imagery, the weather meteorologist report. Or I could just guess. Or if I have access to a window, I could look out the window. But if I'm on a plane, we just talked about, earlier, I said how much I enjoy flying, and that I'm moving forward with my private pilot's courses. You start on a plane in one place, looking out the window is only going to tell you what the weather is here. It's not going to tell you what the weather is there when you get off the plane in 5 hours or 10 hours or 15 hours. Are you going to call, your cousin's best friend from second grade because they said that they get a feeling when it gets rainy? I mean, you got to always ask yourself, where am I getting this information? All the things I mentioned over and over again, credible sources, how do you know that, critical thinking, those questions are the core of just life. How do you know stuff? And most of us know very little. Just about all of the potential knowledge in the universe, we know very little. I have little areas where I have a reasonable amount of knowledge simply because I either went to advanced university degree programs and or practiced in businesses for a certain amount of time. So I have more knowledge than people who haven't done those things. But I still only have a fraction of knowledge of what's possible to what's knowable, or even what we think to be knowable. We don't even know what's unknown and unknowable, right? My argument is we don't know everything. Data can help us better understand where our strengths and potential areas for improvement are. And one of the things that we do focus on a lot, and we've done programs about, is that if you don't have an awareness of your skill set, you're in deep trouble. And that's, I think, part of what this data, when we sort of broaden the scope of what we're saying, is more than your paycheck. We talked about how it impacts families, right? And how children who don't hear enough words don't have a large enough vocabulary because their parents and family and caregivers don't have large vocabulary, and they're not spoken to, and they're not read to, and they're not taught these words. Then they enter into a school program around age 5, and they're already behind almost half their life behind the peers who did have adults who spoke, read, and taught and used the language. So you need to find out and get an idea, where are you? And no matter where you are, there's room for improvement. More precise usage of words, broader usage of words, which brings us to this final question. How do I enhance my vocabulary? So let's presuppose that my assertions are just accurate for the moment, right? So there's a correlation between vocabulary and income. I've sort of generally labeled that small vocabulary, small paycheck. We've also established that it's beyond just your job and your paycheck. It's also going to impact your family, and especially children, very young children, newborns that don't have the ability to acquire as much language as they would around someone who had a larger vocabulary. So it's not just that it impacts you at work, it impacts you and also can really seriously create a deficiency for infants and developing children. What do you do about it? Right? What do you do about it? Well, I shared at the outset, one of the things I just do because it's fun is I read. I read a lot. I could read more because I love it so much. And the key with reading is that you also need to make sure you're reading a variety of different types of material. So I read stuff that is related to some specific legal question I'm interested in or thinking about or just curious. So it's written in a certain way and uses a certain vocabulary. I also read things that are just some mass market, sometimes even, a gossipy thing. It's not even related to anything professionally, but it's using different words. That exposes me to slang and different trends and new vocabulary words that are used in different parts of popular culture. There's a very important suggestion that you make sure that you're reading a lot of fiction. Now, this is a challenge for me because my favorite thing to read is nonfiction. Because I love data and stories. I love biographies and I love history. So I love nonfiction, but it's really important you read fiction because that'll also have a different variety and diversity of vocabulary words. So that's really important. So diversity of content, diversity of genre, diversity, certainly for those of the community that are multilingual, then you want to make sure that you're continuing to read in different languages. So there's a link on the show note that says show notes page. It says the most common recommendation for improving vocabulary usually is to read as much as possible. And as a teacher, that's what I've been telling my students certainly since the 1990s when I started teaching university courses. You need to read more. And I'll say to a student who's really struggling with vocabulary and other related, grammar and writing mechanical issues, sentence structure, paragraph structure, you need to be exposed to the language. You have to read more. And then that doesn't matter if it's your first native language or your only language or it's the fifth language you're learning. You just need to be exposed to it. You need to read. And then ideally also, if you could, have conversations, you need to read it, you need to speak it, you need to use it. There's an important show note that I really want to emphasize here toward the culmination of the program. Okay, reading is usually strongly recommended. It's also readily accessible. So go to your library. And now we of course have access to so much on our virtual libraries, but you need to just expose yourself to reading. One distinction that was made in the show notes from the professor that I quoted earlier, making these arguments about income and vocabulary, right, is that when you're looking at how to increase your vocabulary, don't just go try to memorize individual words. So I was talking about reading, right? I said read fiction, I said nonfiction, I said I don't care if it's a gossip, story, or sports, or it doesn't matter, right? I just said you need to read. Now I didn't say just go read individual words, like just go open up a page of a dictionary and just start reading all the pages on there and trying to memorize it, or doing flashcards where you I'm sure they have virtual versions of it where here's a word, then you memorize it, then you do another word, and then you memorize it. That sort of rote drill of it. When you're learning a new language, there's a whole body of data that you need to access to see what are some of the recommended ways, and then you need to test and see what ways work best for you when you're acquiring another language. For me, I think that at the end you need to have some understanding of the rules of the language, the structure of it, right? The grammar. And then of course the most, I'm going to say most useful, at least in day-to-day life, if you're not necessarily going to be doing it professionally, you need to be able to communicate in it. In other words, do people understand what you're saying? Do they understand what you're trying to convey to them? So just memorizing words in a dictionary with no context to it is not necessarily going to be the most effective way to learn it and to retain it. You're not trying to memorize it, you're trying to master it. And so the quote there about on the show page, It says a large vocabulary results not from memorizing word lists, but from acquiring knowledge about the social and natural worlds. What does that mean? Exactly what it sounds like. I could tell you what a word on a piece, you can memorize what a word means, but that doesn't necessarily have the same ability to be stored well in your memory and be accessible as if you were out in the world. You were holding the thing and someone taught you that's what this is the vocabulary word for that. It's you're in the natural world and you see it. That's why when we talked earlier about the sort of deficiency that low vocabulary, small vocabulary adults have with their children, it's because they're not doing what a lot of large vocabulary people do. Large vocabulary people with their children are out in the real life. Here's a tree, we're touching it. Here's an orange, we're holding it. We're at the store. You see this, it's a blouse. You see this, these are blue jeans. You see this is a leather shoe. I mean, they're doing this, right? Like this is in the real life. So not only is this some random thing that you learned without context, but I'm applying it. I'm showing you right now. This is it. And that's really important. And so a way to do that and mimic that is to read. And then, of course, be out in the natural world if you can, as much as possible, with people who have other vocabulary words or expertise that can continue to help you enhance your vocabulary. I strongly suggest, again, that you take this, whether you love words, despise words, haven't read anything that's not been mandatory since you were in high school, or you read all the time and you're a voracious reader. The point simply is that the facility of the language does impact professional opportunities, and it does really impact personal families and the development of children. And I don't think there's anyone, and I've worked with a lot of different people, especially as an attorney, handled a lot of very difficult family law cases, and even, I handle criminal law cases. I've never known anyone who would say openly that they're not bothered at all with by understanding that their refusal to enhance their vocabulary is going to put their child years behind their peer group in terms of preparedness for school. I've never heard anybody, and I've known a lot of people who've made really not good choices, but that's an extreme position. I think the challenge is that many people have not a clue that that's the impact, that their vocabulary is impacting their children that way. And so because you don't know, what you just do what you've been doing. You have to speak, you have to read, you have to expose again yourself and your child to the language. And that's a kind of a twofer, right? So the adult who's expanding their vocabulary is reading, is speaking, and exposing the child, if they're a child in their family in their home at the same time. So everybody's winning, right? It's a winner. I love the beauty of words and language. I hope that you do too. How you express yourself is really important. I will close with the the anecdote from many years ago when I was young and in school, going through primary school, elementary school, and high school. I would get feedback from peers, and they would say something along the lines of, "Why do you use all those big words?" And they would usually be teasing me, making fun of me, putting me down because of the vocabulary I use. And that really was less than awesome. The challenge is that I did grow up in a family of people that love words and read and speak a lot and have a lot of education, formal and informal. So I was already, I was brought up in that environment. And the other thing is I just love it. It makes me happy. So it was not great that, to be teased and made fun of when people, oh, look at all those words. Why do you use those big words? Why do you do that? Okay. It's because that's how I learned the language. I speak exactly like my parents and like my grandparents. I mean, which is exactly what that study is talking about. That if your family doesn't use a lot of large vocabulary words, you don't learn them, you don't know them. It works the other way too, right? So I learned all this normally and just sort of like everybody else does. And so by the time I got to school, I was already speaking like this. And all I did is I, continued to get older, is learn different types of words and read more things and learn different knowledge and all these different spheres of information. But I already had this, syntax and the vocabulary and I had the love of learning new words. So when you learn a new word, one of your favorite things to do, which I'll admit it openly, is to use it. One, that reinforces it, but two, that's the fun part of it, of using it, right? It's like buying some new thing that you just think is great. Oh, I bought this new briefcase. Well, I want at some point to take it out so the other people can see it, right? Look at that. It's the same thing with my new words. I want to use them. And so when you do that in some environments, I just wanted to be very honest that it's not always easy to enhance your vocabulary, and it's not always easy to love words. I was teased and made fun of and ridiculed for the love of words and and quote the big words, which I'm not really sure what the criteria was for what was big, what was average, and what was small, but I heard that consistently. So it's not always easy, and you may not always have support, but that's, in my mind, irrelevant. What's your goal? Remember, it's all about surpassing your goals, and so you have to focus on yourself. And if you have exposure to or your children, your own children, somebody else's children, any children, then we're talking about how serious this is. And so I'm admitting that it's not always received well, depending on your community. It may not even be at your job. You may be at your job, and someone may give you the adult equivalent of what I got on the playground as a kid, and they may, why do you use all those big words? Okay, look. We go into a lot of discussion in mini programs that other people will take their own insecurities and their own fears and use that to behave in ways that are really counterproductive to their own success. Ignore it. Enjoy enhancing your vocabulary. Enjoy the potential opportunities for enhancing your paycheck that will go along with that if you apply in an area where it's related, your increased vocabulary and knowledge and fluency. And I would think you'd be jumping up and down, at least emotionally, with excitement of the benefit you'll give to children. What an advantage to give somebody by giving them exposure to the vocabulary that they need so that they can get out there and start life equal to or ahead of the peer group in terms of acquisition of language and vocabulary. That's a big deal. And what a gift you can give. And except for the time you have to read things, it really shouldn't cost you any money. And again, libraries, I still really encourage you, go to the library, especially if you think, well, I don't have the resources to go out and buy a whole bunch of books. And okay, well then go to the library and read them. They're sitting over there, and in most parts of the world, there's availability. And for those where there isn't, certainly reach out to us. I'll try to do everything in my power to find a resource to get the materials to you, because you have to have every opportunity to enhance your own life, and certainly for those children in your lives, to give them the chance that they need. So this is, again, just one of those topics that it touches on a lot, but the basic issue, I hope, was assertively put forward, which is, yes, the size of your vocabulary is limiting the size of your paycheck. So let's increase our vocabulary, increase our paycheck. I'm also, again, adding beyond that, you'll get an extra bonus, if you will, that you'll enhance infants and children and give them a chance at getting out there in life and starting on the right path instead of being at a deficit and behind, a 5-year-old behind when they start school. And also, I just added that you may be surprised that you'll start to enjoy it. Even if you're someone who thinks, I don't really care about vocabulary, I don't like reading, I'll just do it because I have to. If I have to get this will help me with my career, or this will help me, with my family, whatever, but I'm not into it. You might be surprised at the things you learn, and when you read more and you expose yourself to different types of ideas, you may actually start to really enjoy just the process, because it's thinking. And I love thinking, and I know you do too. That's why you're part of our program. I do encourage you, as we close, to always go to CourtneyAnderson.com. I do ask you to share on social media any of our programs or this program that you feel have something potentially worthwhile for anyone. So get out there and share and post our material and our links. Leave us a review on iTunes. And again, I am just indebted to you. Make sure you stop by our show page and go to our show sponsor showcase. Certainly, education and the ability to define yourself. Remember the quote I read earlier? And it said that demographics isn't destiny. Demographics is your population, right? So economic population, ethnic population, things of that nature. That's not destiny, according to that source I quoted earlier. Vocabulary might be. Well, we can do something about vocabulary. We can't necessarily address many of the things in our demographic profile because they're beyond our control. My age, I can't do anything about that. I am the age. That's how long at least I've been told how long I've been alive. My vocabulary, I can do something about that. And if I go to a library or a resource, I can do it for free. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful you were here today. Move forward, learn your new vocabulary words, share some with me, and thank you.